All right, so I am starting the live stream right now, and we do have a quorum, so we are good to go.
All righty. Well, I want to welcome everyone to the Triangle Area Rural Planning Organization RTAC meeting. Thank you for taking time to attend. You've already taken care of a roll call, or you want to do that first?
Let me do that now. I'll just read down the list of people that I see, and if I miss anybody, just let me know. So Matt Day with Triangle J Council of Governments, Stephen Robinson with NCDOT Division 7, Wayne Vest with Moore County, Sam Gaskins with Sanford, Donald Andrews with Broadway, Curtis Brown with Siler City, Teresa Thompson with Pittsboro, Tamara Nyegavon with Division 7, Deborah Ensminger with Moore County, Danielle Orloff with Aberdeen, Kirk Smith with Lee County, Kathy Vollert with Division 8, Wilma Laney with Aberdeen, Michael Fioco with Pittsboro, Lisa Mathis with the Board of Transportation, Brian Kluchar with Division 8, Brandon Dawson with Chatham County, Amy Fowler with Orange County, David Montgomery with Sanford, Lee County, Broadway, Julie Bogle with the Transportation Planning Division, Natasha Henderson with the Transportation Planning Division, Tom Tenike with Orange County, Morgan DeWitt with Pittsboro, and BJ Grieve with Southern Pines. Did I miss anybody? All right.
Jack is supposed to be here from the town.
Yeah, he was on our call this morning, but I don't see him on the list here for this one yet. So.
Yeah, he's running.
Okay, are you ready for me to move on?
Yeah.
Okay. All righty. So next item is the ethics reminder. In accordance with the State Government Ethics Act, it is the duty of every TARPO board member to avoid conflicts of interest. Does any member have any known conflict of interest with respect to any matters coming before the board today? If so, please identify the conflict and refrain from any participation in the particular matter involved. So I'll pause. If anybody has any conflict they're aware of, they can state it now. Okay. Item number 2 is purpose and agenda for today's meeting. Matt.
So we do have 2 decision items on your agenda today. One is approval of a submittal for FY23 CMAQ funding. The other is approval of your meeting calendar for the upcoming year. But we will probably spend most of our time speaking on items 12A and 12B, which are information items.
Okay. All right. Any public comment? Do we have anybody from the public joining us, Matt, that we know of?
No members of the public sent me a request to get the link. So,
is there any members of the public online? All right. Moving to this one, speak. Okay. Moving to item number 4, North Carolina Board of Transportation update, Ms. Mathis.
Hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, it's good to, well, I can only see Dawn's face at this point, but it's nice to be with everybody again after the holiday, gearing up for the next one. My board met yesterday, and I am going to, since I saw it on the agenda, let Matt take care of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act update, because it's a lot, so I don't want to put you through that twice. We're pleased about it, but you know, this isn't a fix-all. Just so everybody knows clearly that it is not, doesn't solve all the problems here at all. It is a little too early to tell how it's going to affect specific projects just yet, but of course, we are going to be using a transparent, systematic, and data-driven process to prioritize our projects as usual, and are going to be partnering with local communities, meaning you all, and planning organizations to find and deliver solutions that are going to reflect the needs of each of our communities. So let me talk just a little bit about the state budget that was passed for SL 2021-180, the Appropriations Act, passed the Senate on the 17th and the House on the 18th. And of course, the governor signed it on the 18th. We've got a lot of increases for Division of Highways, including the maintenance reserve, contract resurfacing, roadside environmental money for the bridge program, including preservation money, pavement preservation. We've got 12 million more in Powell, and an additional 50 million for some contingency funds. Additionally, they increased some salary adjustments for DMV. We've got some ARPA funds. We've got another 8 million for some capital projects. We've also got 2 million for some railroad capital maintenance and increased Amtrak costs and some ferry restructuring. So we've got a lot going on there as well, which is really wonderful. I wanted to talk a little bit. I know that they're going to get into the details of a lot of this in addition later in this meeting, but the statewide transportation improvement program. So again, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but I am going to say this again because it's important everybody knows that due to the rising project costs, the prioritization work group recommended and the board concurred that we're going to stop prioritization 6.0 process. We are continuing discussions with the work group to help develop a process moving forward with the 2024 to 2033 STIP. And we expect a draft of that document to be released late in 2022. We approved a scenario for selecting delivery projects for the 2024 and 20 to 2033 STIP. It'll give staff further guidance as they work forward in the process of programming the next STIP. We've got a process that we're trying to be as collaborative and transparent as possible, and I'm certain that you'll be seeing a list of some of those projects, and then of course the real work comes when we're picking the next group of projects, given the bucket of money that we have allowed. So that'll be a lot of our work for next year. One exciting thing you all might have also seen in the news, we had two I-40 designations. So we approved to honorarily designate adjacent sections of I-40 at the Durham and Orange County line for UNC basketball coaches Dean Smith and Roy Williams. Roy and his wife were with us at the board meeting, and Dean Smith's children were there. So we're excited that the Smith section is 3 miles east of US 15501, and the Williams section is the 4 miles west on 15501. So we're very excited about that. So you should be seeing the signs going up very soon. So does anybody have any questions? If not, that concludes my report.
Thank you, ma'am. All right, NCDOT Transportation Planning Division update, Ms. Vogel.
Good afternoon. So I don't have a newsletter in your packet for today, but I am finalizing one to send it to Matt to distribute later. But to highlight a few things, NCDOT adopted in September an official resilience policy, and it is online, and the newsletter will have a link. And I provided more information in there on transportation resilience and NCDOT in the packet. Upcoming in January 7th, there will be a webinar by FTA on that new bipartisan infrastructure law. And then with the CTP status updates, I wanted to briefly introduce a new transportation engineer that TPD has, Natasha Henderson. She will be working with Pittsburgh on their CTP amendment, and our contact info will be in the newsletter. So Pittsburgh's CTP amendment has just started the process with discussions. And another CTP update would be the Durham Chapel Hill Carborough's Amendment 3. It has been suspended due to complexity and staff resources, but they are anticipating adopting a smaller amendment in this coming February 2022. And that's it for my updates.
Any questions for Julie? All right. NCDOT Division 7 update, Mr. Robinson.
Good afternoon. Can you guys all hear me all right?
Yes, sir.
Good. Our project updates have been provided and are in the packet, and I do not have anything to add or correct aside from that at this time, but I am here if there's any questions that I could help answer.
Any questions on Division 7 updates? Thank you, sir. NCDOT Division 8 updates, Mr. Clochard.
Good afternoon. Kathy is also with us from Division 8, and we are on page 7 with the orange banner. And as previously noted, the Chatham Lee Deep River US 15501 bridge is open to traffic, and we are awaiting updates from the Spot P6 work group for committed, uncommitted project decisions. And that's why while they develop the new STIP, but be glad to take any questions.
Any questions on Division 8 updates? All right, thanks, sir. TARPO staff updates.
All right. So you do have my materials in your packet as well. And I just wanted to point out a few items in there to highlight. One is the Second Avenue Corridor Study, RFLOI. So this was a study that we had requested what's called SPR funding from NCDOT to pay for. And we did receive that funding for the current fiscal year. So we are getting underway on the process of getting a consultant on board to do that study. This is in Siler City, and we released that RFLOI last week and hope to select a consultant in January. So trying to move things along with that process. Couple other items in there to highlight, just in case you hadn't already noticed, we are now streaming the meetings to YouTube. So if you ever miss a meeting or forget something that you heard in a meeting and want to check it out, all those recorded meetings will now be there. And this also allows us to have a way to let the public view the meeting without sort of compromising security of the Zoom platform. So it's kind of good in a couple of different ways. We've also done a couple of recent updates to the website. So if you haven't checked it out lately, the current STIP section of the website, as well as the mapping section, have been recently updated. We also have developed a new member handbook. The new member handbook we had previously was almost 10 years old now and was pretty outdated. So I'll be actually posting that probably later today. And I did also notice that one of the things I was supposed to include in the agenda and forgot was the first quarter finance memo. So I will also be posting that online and including it in the newsletter that goes out after the meeting. And then one final note is that we do need to fill a couple of appointments on the RTAC. So I will be reaching out to the folks that are affected by that soon. The Moore County municipal seat is now vacant since Mayor McHugh did not run for re-election. And I know that Commissioner Fioco is on the call today, but I believe this will be his last meeting with us as well. So we will have to officially fill the Chatham municipal seat as well. I believe that's all that I have.
Any questions for Matt about the TARPO staff update? And Matt, can we just at least send, I guess, a letter or whatever to Mayor McHugh and to Councilman Yaco for their service on the TARPO?
We can do that.
Thank you. All righty. RTCC adjournment and report to the RTAC. Ms. Thompson.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. I will take a motion to adjourn the RTCC meeting.
This is Jack. I move.
Thank you, Jack. And is there a second?
It's BJ Grieve, I second.
Thank you, BJ. All right, the RTCC meeting is adjourned. And we had 2 decision items today, which is the same on your agenda. The first item, we recommended approval for the project submittal for fiscal year 23 for the CMAQ funding. Second item, we also recommended approval for the proposed 22 meeting calendar with the understanding that if the RTAC approves something different, we will follow that as well. And we also had 4 discussion items, which again is the same as what's on your agenda. So the first one, P6 scoring results, Matt went over this and answered several questions. He discussed the details on the possible transition from P6 to P7 and estimation of a timeline. The second item, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, Matt presented this as well and answered a few questions, mainly about how 421 could become a interstate, the logistics of that. The third discussion item, the S line, there were a couple of minor questions on that proposed corridor, but no additional discussion beyond that. And the the last 4th item, the STIP updates, Matt went over that. There were 3 or 4 updates and there was no additional discussion beyond that. And that's our report. Thank you.
All right, moving into the RTAC agenda, approval of the October 14th, 2021 meeting summary. And whoever makes a motion, please give your name and who's the second, and then Matt will call roll.
Mr. Chair, Kirk Smith, move to approve the minutes.
Okay, Chairman Smith made the motion. Is there a second?
Second, Amy Fowler.
Commissioner Fowler, second. All right, Matt, do you want to?
I can read the roll. Donald Andrews,
Yes.
Kirk Smith,
Affirmative.
Michael Fioco,
Yes.
Lisa Mathis,
Yes.
Amy Fowler.
Yes.
And let me just check and make sure nobody else snuck in late. Mike Dasher.
Yes.
Good.
That is unanimous then.
Okay. All right. Item 11, decision items. 11A is approval of project submitted for fiscal year 23 CMAQ funding.
I'll make a motion to approve. This is Michael Fioco.
All right. I have a motion by Michael to approve. Is there a second?
Second, Amy Fowler.
Second by Commissioner Fowler. Any discussion? All right, Matt, roll call.
All right.
That was quick.
Yeah. Donald Andrews,
Yes.
Kirk Smith,
Did we lose the chairman? Is he still on?
Let me check. Still says that he's on. Is Kirk Smith on the call?
Yes, I voted in the affirmative.
Okay, we just didn't hear you. Sorry about that. Michael Fiocco,
Yes.
Lisa Mathis,
Yes.
Amy Fowler,
Yes.
Mike Dasher.
Yes.
That is unanimous.
Alrighty. Decision item 11B, approval of the 2022 meeting calendar.
I move approval of the 2022 meeting calendar. Amy Fowler.
Motion by Commissioner Fowler,
Second,
Mike.
Lisa Mathis.
second by Board Member Mathis. Any discussion?
Yes, Mr. Chair, in discussion, I've already set my calendar.
Okay. All right, any other discussion? All right, Matt, roll call?
All right. Donald Andrews,
Yes.
Kirk Smith,
Yes.
Michael Fiocco,
Yes.
Lisa Mathis,
Yes.
Amy Fowler,
Yes.
Mike Dasher.
Yes.
That is unanimous.
All right. Discussion items, prioritization 6.0 scoring results.
Okay. So just as a reminder, I know I say this every time, but NCDOT did announce a halt to the prioritization 6.0 process this summer, but they were almost complete with the project scores at the time that happened. And so they did go ahead and finish developing those project scores and did release those scores to us a few weeks ago. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today. I want to be very clear that these scores are not being used to select projects at this point in time. So if we can get some useful information from them in terms of sort of how our projects performed and which ones we might want to sort of go back to the drawing board on, and which ones are more likely to be in position to get funded in the future. But to be clear, none of this information, none of this scoring is going to be used for anything at this point in time. So this is entirely just informational. And I did perform a little bit of some basic analysis of the scores. I included in your packet a table that is broken out by county that'll show you within your county sort of in rank order how the projects ranked. So they're listed from highest scoring to lowest scoring. But some of the charts I'm going to go through in this meeting today are sort of looking at our whole universe of projects for the whole RPO. Now, I know this is a lot to look at. So to boil this down to basics, each of the red dots on this screen represents a score for a project that is in the TARPO area. And then the gray boxes tell you the range of scores that fall between the first quartile and the third quartile, meaning that half of the projects had scores that fell within that gray box. And then you have a quarter that fall above the gray box and a quarter that fall below the gray box. So when we look at this, we can see that we had a pretty wide dispersal of results for the projects that were submitted in our area. We did have several that scored in that top quartile of projects, but we also had quite a few that scored in that bottom quartile. And so I have some charts that kind of go through and look at this by mode to kind of see which projects fell at the top of the list and which ones fell at the bottom of the list. And I think the main takeaway message I want you to get from these slides today is the projects. Okay, so first off, we have no idea in a theoretical situation where there had actually been money available to program projects in prioritization 6.0. We have no idea where that cut line would have actually fallen. So I'm using, sort of the top 25% of projects as a proxy for saying this is a high scoring project, and the bottom 25% as a proxy for this is a low scoring project. But in reality, we have no idea in a theoretical situation where that cut line would have fallen. So just take all of this with a little bit of a grain of salt. And the idea is projects that are in that top quarter, they scored really well. They have a pretty decent chance of getting funded in a future round. The projects that fell in that bottom quarter, those are projects that we probably need to think about. Either is this a project we want to continue to submit and continue to support, or is this a project that we want to try to modify somehow to see if there's a way to get it to score better in the future? So that's sort of the whole reason for going through this analysis of the scores, is to help us think through some of those decisions. So looking at the highway projects, we did have, as you recall, there are 3 separate buckets of fundings. There's a statewide bucket, a regional bucket, and a division bucket. And different types of projects are eligible for different buckets. So you will see there are a lot more dots in the division buckets than there are in the regional buckets. And that's because eligibility grows the further down you go. So we have 5 projects that scored in that sort of top tier in different buckets, but the improvements at NC 87 and the Carolina Trace entrance in Lee County, improvements to the US 1 NC 42 interchange in Sanford, super street improvements along NC 87, basically from the Walmart area down to the Harnett County line in Lee County. A proposed direct connection between 211 and Roseland Road in the Aberdeen area, and then improvements to the NC 211 and Rattlesnake Trail intersection in Pinehurst. Those are the 5 that scored sort of in that top tier. And then we had quite a few that scored in the bottom tier, and that included quite a few modernization projects. So modernization projects on NC 87 north of Pittsboro, NC 87 through Pittsboro, NC 751 in Chatham County, NC 2427 in Moore County, Lebanon Road in Orange County, and then several intersection projects. So US 15501 and Deep River Road intersection in Lee County, US 421 NC 902 interchange in Chatham County, and a couple of other sort of projects, a super street improvement project on US 421 in Chatham County, some various improvements to Midland Road in the Southern Pines and Pinehurst area, widening and extension of Colon Road in Sanford, and then a connector road between Ashby Road and NC 42 in Sanford. So those were sort of the projects that fell to the bottom. Any questions on this before we move on to talk about the other modes?
Not a question, Matthew, but just a statement. I did notice this past week that Deep River Road in US 15501 now has a traffic control signal.
Aha. Well, that may be the solution to the problem then. I think we had submitted that project as a potential. We put it in as we know something needs to happen here, but we're not sure exactly what needs to happen here. So if they've put in a signal, that may actually solve the problem with that one. All right. So looking at bicycle and pedestrian projects, these are actually only eligible in the division category, and we only have them in Division 8. We didn't submit any projects in Division 7. So I'm just going to very quickly run down the list of which ones scored high and which ones scored low. So for high scoring, we had Wicker Street in Sanford, 3rd Street in, I believe that's 3rd Street in Siler City, although it could be 3rd Street in Sanford. I'd have to go back and check. Hawkins Avenue in Sanford, McKeever Street in Sanford, Carbonton Road in Sanford, Aberdeen Downtown Pedestrian Crossings, 7th Street in Sanford, Bragg Street in Sanford, PD Road in Southern Pines, Downtown Pittsboro Pedestrian Crossings, East 3rd and North 10th in Siler City, North 2nd and Cottage Grove in Siler City, and East 3rd and North Avenue in Siler City. And then for the low scoring, we had Elk Street in Siler City, Central Drive in Southern Pines, Murdochsville Road in Pinehurst, and West Street in Pittsboro. And then this last chart combines several modes. So this is a combination of aviation, rail, and transit projects. And just to provide some clarity here, the letters indicate sort of which agency that project came from. So CHT would be Chapel Hill Transit, OCPT is Orange County Public Transit, CTN is Chatham Transit Network. And then for the airports, it's based on their airport code, which isn't always intuitive. So SOP is the Moore County Airport, SCR is the Siler City Airport, and TTA is Raleigh Executive Jetport in Lee County. So you can see that we had on transit projects, the proposed Chapel Hill to Pittsboro bus improvements from Chapel Hill Transit scored pretty well. The proposed micromobility vans and additional bus for Orange County Public Transit and Chatham Transit Network did not score very well. And on the airport projects, we had 4 high scoring projects from Moore County, 1 from Siler City, 1 from Raleigh Exec. And then in the low scoring, we had 3 from Raleigh Executive Jetport. And then there was also a proposal from DOT looking at institution of passenger service on the S line, which we're going to talk about in a little bit later, but that also scored relatively low. So that, I believe, gets us through the score information. Just to remind you, the packet does have your list of projects by county. If you would like to see the full spreadsheet, I do have that posted on our website. And as was discussed a little bit earlier during the Board of Transportation update, we do expect we will have more information available very soon about the process for developing the 24 through 33 STIP. I'm hopeful that we will have enough of that nailed down within the next month or so that we'll be able to have a pretty clear idea of how that'll work by our February meeting.
Any questions for Matt on the prioritization 6.0 scoring? Thank you for the information. There's a whole lot to take in. All righty. Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act.
All right. So I just wanted to provide you with some really high level basic information about this. This is the, you may have heard this referred to as the bipartisan infrastructure bill. So sometimes you'll see it referred to as IIJA and sometimes you'll see it as BIB, but they're the same thing. It did become law on November 15th. It provides for $423 billion in funding that is continuation funding of existing programs, so basically baseline funding, and then $550 billion in new or additional funding on top of that. It does cover 5 years, and on the transportation side of it, the existing transportation funding that's accounted for is basically what would have been a continuation of the previous transportation funding, which was the FAST Act. So then on top of that continuation funding, there is an additional 284 billion specifically for transportation, which results in a total of 500 billion for transportation overall. The remainder of the funds that are involved are for various other infrastructure programs, so things like water and energy and all kinds of various other things. And then this bottom line here, this is getting at what I think was being discussed earlier in the meeting. So NCDOT should receive about 8 billion in formula funds. So some of the funds in the law are specifically go to states by formula, and other funds are competitive grants. So in terms of the formula funds, NCDOT is expecting they should get about a 29% increase in what they're receiving. However, what I've been told from folks in DOT who would know better about this than I do, that 29% increase, while it certainly helps, is not enough to sort of fill the entire hole that we have in terms of projects in the existing STIP document costing more money than the revenues that are expected. So that 29% bump helps, but it's not enough to fill the hole. So I think that's pretty consistent with what Ms. Mathis said earlier in the meeting. So the left side of the screen here is just showing overall in terms of the total new funding. The blue box at the bottom is the portion of it that goes to transportation. You can see it is clearly the largest portion of the funding. And then on the right, you can see within that 284 billion of transportation funding, that's new funding, which types of projects it's going towards. So the largest chunk of it, 110 billion, goes to roads and bridges. The next largest chunk is 66 billion to rail. And then, the third largest, you're all the way down to 39 billion for transit. And then you've got various other programs sort of eating up the rest of it. There are a number of new and expanded competitive grant programs as part of the law. So I'm going to quickly run down this list. I will tell you off the top here, I do not have very much information on any of these. They haven't really put out any guidance or anything yet. This is all very new, but in terms of new grants, there is one called Safe Streets for All that is focused on safety issues. There is a new grant for airport terminals, a new grant for mega projects. So that would be like very large projects, multi-state projects, multi-region projects, those types of things. A new grant called Protect, which is geared towards resiliency projects. A new ferry grant, a new grant for nationally significant bridges, a new grant for station accessibility improvements, a new grant for charging and fueling infrastructure for vehicles, a new grant called Reconnecting Communities Pilot Program that is looking at areas where, in the past, a freeway or an interstate or something was built through a community, and there's now an interest in going back and retrofitting that and reconnecting that neighborhood and removing the freeway or something along those lines. There is a new grant called SMART Grant, and unfortunately, I can't remember what that one is about. I could look it up if anybody really wants to know. And then there's also a new grant for rural surface transportation program projects. Now, before we get too excited about that certainly is great for rural areas, but to be clear, the definition of rural is anything with less than 200,000 people. So it's a pretty low bar for defining what means rural. Then there's also expanded money for a number of other existing grant programs. And this is getting a little bit down in the weeds, but there is also a change to the way that they do the formula funds for what's called surface transportation block grant. This is kind of the main pot of money that DOT spends on your typical, road projects. And the way that the law sets it out, DOT gets a certain amount of money, but then they are required to set aside a certain amount of that money for different areas within the state based on their population. And so they used to base it on 3 population bands, areas that were over 200,000, areas that were under 5,000, and then everything in the middle. So from 5,000 to 200,000 was in one pot. They have now decided to go in and split that middle group into 2 pots. So there's now going to be a 5 to 50,000 and then a 50,000 to 200,000. And so realistically, what that means for us is that before that money was being shared between RPO areas and small MPO areas, and now this will essentially split it out so that the small MPOs will have their own suballocation of those funds and the RPO areas will have their own suballocation. So I don't know realistically what impact that'll have, but it does affect us. And then they've also increased the amount that is set aside for the TAP program. That is the money that is typically used for bicycle and pedestrian projects. And then lastly, there is a provision sort of buried in the law that designates US 421 as a high priority corridor between Greensboro and Dunn. This is, for those of you who've been around for a while, you may remember that back in 2019, we actually had some folks come and do a presentation to our boards talking about the idea of turning this corridor into a future interstate. They're proposing a number of 685 for that. And back in 2019, TARPO actually did approve a resolution of support for trying to get this designated as a future interstate. So my understanding, and I am not an expert on this at all, but my understanding is that this designation in the law as a high priority corridor is essentially the first step towards getting the corridor later designated as a future interstate. So that pretty much runs the extent of what I know about this, but I wanted to make sure you were all aware of it. That covers what I had to say.
Okay. Any questions for Matt on the Infrastructure and Jobs Act?
Not a question. I just want to make a observation. As we understand, we have the ARPA funding, which has a deadline of 2024, and everybody's got money to spend for water, sewer, and infrastructure there. And now we have a infrastructure bill that's a national bill that's coming out that is going to have a deadline of 2026. I'm going to be frank with you. I don't see where we're going to have the construction capabilities to meet all the desires by the time these deadlines come to an end. So I'm just being skeptical on that fact because of the fact that we have all this money being thrown at us. We're having all these desires to build things, and I don't foresee that being accomplished in the deadlines that are prescribed by the spending requirements.
That is a conversation I think is going on in multiple places. Commissioner Smith was on last week with the folks from Withers, and that seems to be a theme that all this money and there's not enough material, manpower, and to do everything by these deadlines. So it's going to be interesting to see if they extend some of these deadlines. Any other comments?
I want to add into that a little bit. The Commissioner Smith is correct about the timelines, but the money needs to be committed, contracted by the end of, for ARPA by the end of 2024, but it does not need to be paid out until the end of 2026. So there may be, it's still going to be cramped as suggested, but it's a little more of an extension there already. And I haven't seen when the actual payout needs to be for the IIP. The one question I do have for Matt is, do we have any idea how soon signs will be going up indicating that that is a future interstate corridor?
I don't know the answer to that, but my understanding is that there is still another step that they'll have to, that NCDOT will have to take to like apply for the officially for the future interstate designation. But I don't know what the timeline would be on that.
Yeah, with Toyota's announcement, I think it'd be definitely helpful to have that indicated as a future interstate corridor for our vendors who will be supplying the suppliers for the Toyota facility. The sooner the better.
All right, any other questions, comments? All right, Matt, thank you again for the information. Discussion item C, S-Line transit oriented development study kickoff.
All right. So this is just a very quick item, just essentially as a heads up. I know that we have talked in the past about the S-Line. This is the north-south rail line that kind of runs right through the center of our RPO, from Raleigh down through Sanford and down to Southern Pines and on down into South Carolina. NCDOT is actually working on a study right now looking at transit-oriented development potential around potential future station locations in that corridor. So NCDOT is currently in talks with CSX about purchasing the section of this line that is north of Raleigh. That's a section that's currently a dead end in terms of the tracks, and gets fairly little use. And so CSX has some interest in potentially selling it, as well as the fact that Virginia to the north has actually already purchased their section of that line from CSX. And so NCDOT is kind of working on that, but then is also interested in looking at the possibilities for, is there potential for this S-Line corridor, both north and south of Raleigh, to be a potential future commuter rail service corridor. And so part of what they're looking at in this study is sort of what is the market for, what is happening around these different communities in the corridor, what is the potential market for commuter rail in this corridor, that sort of thing. And one of the areas that's being examined as part of the study is Sanford. So on the screen, you can see the map of the sort of section of the line that they're studying as part of this transit-oriented development study. I will say, obviously, the line does continue south and north of that point, but this is sort of the section they've zoomed in on for this particular study. Sanford's kind of the south end of it, but then all the way up through Raleigh and up to Henderson and up to Warren County. So they're still fairly early in this process. They just had their big kickoff meeting. I believe it was in October. It might have been November. I can't remember now. But they're kind of aiming to have this study wrapped up by the end of next year, and expect we'll see more information about sort of the items coming out of the study and public involvement, those types of things over the course of the next year. So that's all I have on that.
Any questions on the S-Line study kickoff?
I have not a question, but I just wanted to give you a little bit of a heads up as well that NCDOT has hired a consultant to look at microtransit in our area as well. So stay tuned.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else? All right. STIP updates.
All right. This is a pretty short one. this time. We only have 3 changes since our last meeting. And they were all in the November Board of Transportation handout. So there's a 1-year delay to the Chatham Parkway North project in Pittsboro, pushing right of way back to 23 and construction to 24. There was some additional funding added to a vehicle purchase for Orange County Public Transportation. And then there was a project segment break put in on the US 1 Super Street project in Southern Pines and Aberdeen to allow them to begin work on the water line relocation part of that project.
Okay. Any questions? All righty. I think that covers everything that was on the agenda. Any member updates from around the region? Anybody got any updates they want to share with the group?
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Smith.
just wanted to share with everybody, we're going to have a ribbon cutting for the mountain bike trails at Stanley Park that we reopened and revamped and reconfigured to be safer and more fun and more professional.
Good deal. Anyone else?
When is
Oh, I'm
that ribbon
sorry.
cutting? Yeah,
I'm sorry. Saturday morning, 9 o'clock at Stanley Park.
Saturday, 9 a.m. Thank you.
Yes.
Anyone else? Alrighty, so it looks like our next tentative meeting will be Thursday, February the 10th, 10:30. We still don't know whether we're gonna be in person or virtual, right, Matt?
Yeah, I've kind of been following the lead of Triangle J. So when their board starts meeting in person again, we'll start meeting in person again.
Okay, all right. All righty, anyone else? Anything else? All right, well, thank you for your time this afternoon. Hope everyone has a Merry Christmas and looking forward to 2022. And if there's nothing else, we will stand adjourned.
Thanks, everybody.
Merry Christmas, everybody.
Merry Christmas.